Did the creator of The Twilight Zone hate Star Trek? I say no. I'm here to prove it. On this episode of Geeks with Beef. Terrible title. It's a terrible name. It's just fucking lazy as fuck name, sorry. So for the longest time, people thought that Rod Serling hated the show Star Trek because he said a couple of negative things in interviews about it. For you young geeks out there wasn't much science fiction television for a long time. The first show was called Tales of Tomorrow, then Rod Serling showed up with his TV show The Twilight Zone, of which he wrote himself 90 episodes of. He also found a very young talented writer by the name of Richard Matheson, who would write some of the best Twilight Zone episodes and then go on to write I Am Legend and What Dreams May Come. I Am Legend would also be the influence for George Romero's Night of the Living Dead. So for geek culture, the original Twilight Zone is super important. It laid so much groundwork for science fiction and inspired people like George Lucas and Steven Spielberg to go on and make the films they did. So when the next big science fiction show came around, Star Trek, and his protege Richard Matheson even went over and wrote a couple episodes, people were curious to see what did Rod Serling think about the new Star Trek show.
Came Star Trek, but none of those shows were remotely imitative. They stood on their own feet or fell, whichever the case may be. Star Trek, we discussed it earlier privately, I thought was again a very inconsistent show, which at times sparkled with true ingenuity and pure science fiction approaches, and other times was more carnival-like and very much more the creature of television than the creature of a legitimate literary form.
And so for a long time people thought, oh, he's just bashing on Star Trek. And I have an alternate theory. Rod Serling is just a curmudgeon. That is him saying nice things about Star Trek. That's as nice as he gets. When he said it was inconsistent, that means he thought that parts of it were good, which is more than what he said about most television. And how do I know this? He was asked in the same interview what he thought about his own show, Twilight Zone, which won many awards, brought him fame and fortune. And he had this to say.
Were you pleased, satisfied with what you did on the Twilight Zone, ultimately?
I think overall, it lacked consistency. It wasn't a good show every week. It wasn't a good show sometimes 3 weeks running. But judging it on the basis of other television shows, I think we maintained a reasonable consistency.
And look, I myself am a huge curmudgeon and opinionated geek like most geeks. So I gotta be like the Lorax here and speak for the curmudgeons, the John Carpenters of the world, the Rod Serlings of the world. And now you know a little bit more about Geeks with Beef. This might be the only one I ever do because it's the worst fucking name ever. Lazy. And keep watching good art.